Destiny's second episode launches tomorrow, which is why today we're going to be going over the top changes coming in Revenant. Now, I know some of you may not be that crazy about episodes so far, but from my experience playing it for the limited amount of time we got to play it, Revenant's looking pretty solid. Now, if you missed any of the videos over the past few weeks, from the TWABs to the stream recaps, from the weapons and exotics that we got to play with that are going to be dropping with Revenant, no worries, that's why this video exists. These are the 15 biggest changes coming with Act 1 of Revenant. Starting with number 1, Onslaught. Guys, Onslaught was arguably one of the best activities Bungie has ever given us. A true horde mode that is wave-based. Now, a big concern for many of us was that Onslaught was not going to be receiving any other updates, but that's not the case. In Revenant, Onslaught is going to be getting some major overhauls. This new version will be called Onslaught Salvation, and it's going to feature 3 new maps. Or new in a sense that they're new to Onslaught. One of the maps is Widow's Court, which is based on the PvP map, Eventide Labs on Europa, which is another PvP map, and Kel's Grave on the Reeve, which essentially looks like the Gambit map that was sunset so long ago. Here we're going to be facing off against Scorn enemies and Shadow Legion Cabal in this new version of Onslaught. Now, the gameplay of Onslaught is getting some more tweaks as well. For instance, our defenses, we're getting an operatable turret, just like the turret from Destiny 1 on the moon. This can be upgraded all the way to Tier 3. It's going to get things like more health, it's going to deal more damage, and even at Tier 3, it's going to have the ability to scorch enemies, going as far as to synergize with our solar subclass fragments and aspects. Now, there's also going to be a new airstrike feature. You heard that right, guys. An airstrike. You're going to be able to mark the ground, and if an enemy steps in that area, an airstrike will rain down on them. They're also going to do things like upgrade our tripwires to make them explode with stasis slow fields, with higher tier upgrades giving you stasis crystals. And what's so great about this is that all of these changes are also going to apply to our OG Onslaught maps. Now, just like our current version of Onslaught, there will be 3 different modes. First is your 10 wave playlist version. The second is your 50 wave normal difficulty version. And then finally, your 50 wave expert version, which is essentially like our master version pre-final shape. Bungie literally just changed up the names here. It's just as difficult. And after these changes go live, even more so. Now, what happens is at wave 30 plus, you're going to get a small chance of a fully masterwork double perk seasonal weapon to drop. Think of these as almost like shiny drops from Into the Light. And just like before on Expert, you're going to get those double chests every 10th wave. So it's definitely going to be worth your time, guys, tackling the most difficult version of Onslaught. Now, change number 2. Fellas, we're getting a new dungeon. Now, Bungie has not given many hints outside of this one promo picture of it, but this will be called Vesper's Host. Now, this dungeon will be launching Friday, October the 11th, literally just a few days after the launch of the new episode. What makes this dungeon special, though, is that it will be our first ever contest mode dungeon. Now, how this dungeon racing contest mode is going to work is that the first 3 teams to finish the dungeon will be crowned the winners. So there's actually multiple people that can win world's first here. Now, contest mode will be enabled for the first 48 hours that the dungeon is live. But as soon as the first 3 teams clear the dungeon, normal mode will now be available for everyone else. So maybe you're like, yo, I don't want to do contest mode. Fellas, just give it a little bit. I don't think it's going to be anything like Salvation's Edge. By no means is this going to take 24 hours to complete. I could be eating my own words here come Friday, but I believe probably within like 6-7 hours at most, we'll be clearing this dungeon. Now, you'll need to be at 1985 power level to be at the cap through all of these encounters. And for my teams that are going for world's first, in order to win, once the final encounter is complete, the fire team must loot the final chest or their finish may not be recorded. So make sure to loot the chest, guys. Don't dip out to orbit immediately upon getting the kill. On top of that, at least one of the fire team members must have completed and received loot for every encounter, and it must be the first time completing the dungeon for all members of the fire team. Now, for those that are unfamiliar with what contest mode is, this is where enemies are more aggressive, encounters will feature res tokens, and some encounters will have things like enrage mechanics, which limits the number of phases of time players have to complete that encounter. On top of that, power level will not provide an advantage. If you're over that 1985 power level, it doesn't matter. We're at contest mode here, fellas. Now, you may be thinking, Cross, why would I want to do contest mode? I'm literally tackling content that's harder when I could just wait for the normal version of this to open up. You can, but keep in mind, tackling contest mode Vesper's Host will earn you the special emblem and will also give you the dungeon exotic guaranteed upon completing, that being Icebreaker. And what's so beautiful about this is that anyone for the first 48 hours, as long as you complete this dungeon while in contest mode, you will get access to Icebreaker, which is a hell of an incentive. Now, change number 3. With the new episode, we of course have new story beats, but the format itself is also changing this episode. Now, the story is going to revolve around the Echo that has now fallen into Fickrell's hands, and in doing so, it is causing the Scorn to change. Fickrell himself is literally evolving and growing his army, and he's killing Eliksni in order to get the corpses necessary to do so. Here we're going to be teaming with Mithrax, Ido, and other Eliksni throughout this episode. Crow is also going to be playing a big role in this episode, considering his former self, Aldrin, had kind of a strange relationship with Fickrell. Story-wise, though, we don't really know a whole lot yet. Bungie's kind of kept it to themselves, but it's supposed to be very spooky themed. Bungie even mentioned very metal, and it almost seems like we're going to be vampire hunting throughout this next episode. Now, one of the complaints surrounding previous seasons and previous episodes is that everything was time-gated. Here, for the first time, Bungie is going to be releasing all of the story beats at the very beginning of the act. Meaning tomorrow, when Act 1 rolls out, boom, all 4 or 5 weeks of content is going to drop on us right then and there. Now, we're going to have that gap in between Act 1 and Act 2. Yeah, we are. Matter of fact, some people have pointed out that folks are probably going to complain about being bored, as most people are going to blow through the story the very first day. But this is a change that the community has been asking for a very long time. Now, we'll say I don't like time gating either. We'll see how this plays out, and hopefully the activities themselves will be enjoyable enough to keep us on in between each of these acts. Now, keep in mind, this is not the same narrative shakeup that we're going to be seeing in Codename Apollo next year. That's where Bungie's going to be moving away from the whole linear story layout and pretty much throwing away all handholding. Essentially, next year, we're going to have to go find story beats. But it's being said that exploration is going to be a big part of the next annual expansion. That version of storytelling will not be present in Revenant, but yes, overall, much less time gating. Change number 4. Fellas, we're getting some power level increases, which is a bit controversial, considering that we have not seen a power cap increase in a season in quite some time. Last year in Lightfall, none of the seasons, aside from the first one, had a power level increase, and players assumed that would be the same this time around, but that's not the case. The soft cap will be raised to 1950, the powerful cap raised to 2000, and the pinnacle cap raised to 2010. Now, the reason Bungie is doing this is to return that pursuit to in-game players. I know it's not exactly the grind you guys want. Personally, I think it's just 10 power levels. It's 4-month-long seasons, guys. It's not that big of a deal. I think the biggest annoyance out of all of this is upgrade modules and juggling currencies, but for the most part, I'm not stressed about it. We've got 4 months. On top of that, for people that are going to be tackling the day 1 dungeon, everyone's going to be at contest mode anyways, so as long as you're at 1985 power, you're good, man. Now, for those of us that are going to be tackling Onslaught Salvation, well, that's going to be a little more important here, as power will be enabled. Meaning here initially, we're going to be under-leveled and underpowered. So hitting that pinnacle grind week 1 is going to be important. And with other activities like Grandmaster Nightfalls, Master Raids and Dungeons, Trials of Osiris, reaching that pinnacle cap is going to be something we all need to do. Now, change number 5, potion crafting. This is actually such a cool feature, man, especially given this time of the year. And we also got to play with some of the potion crafting that's going to be dropping here with Revenant. Now, keep in mind, this is a dev build. Things will, of course, change, but the potion crafting feature is going to be something all of us are going to want to explore in Revenant. Our partner in crime will be Ido. Yes, we're going to be cooking. She's going to help us craft tonics to battle the evolving Scorn threats. Now, there's going to be 2 types of potion flavors. First is our combat flavor. These are called volatile tonics. This will give us combat boosts, which will then give us in-game bonuses, and will also boost our artifact mods. Now, there's even higher rarities of these combat tonics, which can boost multiple artifact mods at once. Now, example of one of these we saw during the Revenant Dev livestream was the refined tonic of Protecting Frost, which was a legendary tonic, and it grants a number of benefits which last for an hour. One of those stated that while Frost armor is active, primary ammo stasis weapons deal bonus damage. It will also boost 2 artifact mods, the first being Wind Chill, where dealing stasis damage to slow targets has the chance to spawn a stasis shard. And the other artifact boost is for Armor of Aramis, which increases the radius and strength of this freezing burst. So no, you don't have to do potion crafting, but it's definitely something here that's going to add to our lethality. Now, our other flavor is our reward tonic. These are called enriching tonics. This allows us to attune to specific seasonal weapons, similar to how we could during Into the Light and the original Onslaughts. Now, the reason why we're going to want to attune to a weapon is because these seasonal weapons will not be craftable. We're back to RNG, fellas. And I know some of you may hate RNG drops, but it is a big factor within Destiny. Luckily though, there seems to be somewhere around 3 pages of these reward tonics, and there also seems to be an exotic rarity reward tonic, which I'm really curious about. All of these things should mitigate RNG, guys, increasing our odds of getting higher tier drops. Now, change number 6. On the topic of craftable weapons, we need to bring that up as an entire point all on its own. Now, as we just mentioned, in Revenant, our seasonal weapons will not be craftable. You see, Bungie's taken a page out of the Into the Light playbook. They're going to give us the option to attune to weapons through potion crafting and also allow us to tackle higher tiers of Onslaught to have a higher chance to drop those fully masterworked double perk weapons. Now, the reception on this is a bit mixed. Now, I personally believe that many of us have just not been excited about any drops within Destiny. We have a checklist, we have weapons that we're trying to get that are craftable, and all we really care about is getting a red border, and everything else is just fodder to delete in our inventories. Into the Light was really the first time that I stopped and looked at weapons. It was like, ooh, what is this? Ooh, is this a shiny drop? Did I just get the God roll? It's one thing to get a weapon that has the God roll between 2 different traits, but it's a whole different level of God roll when you have a weapon with 4 traits and they're all S tier combinations. Now, for my folks that are like, screw this, I'm not grinding for weapons. Give me the checklist. I want craftable weapons. Fret not. In Revenant, Garden of Salvation is getting reprised weapons, and every one of them, alongside having new perks, will also be craftable. Things like Reckless Oracle will be getting destabilizing rounds, and Paracosmal Affinity, Accrued Redemption will be getting Offhand Strike and Archer's Gambit. Zealous Reward, our fusion rival here, will be getting destabilizing rounds and Reservoir Bursts. Ancient Gospel is now a Void Adaptive Hand Cannon, and it can get Rampage and Kill Clip. Literally Kindle Orchid. Sacred Providence, a kinetic aggressive burst pulse rival, can get Demolitionist and Kinetic Tremors. Prophet of Doom, which may become the best arc precision shotgun in PvP, depending on its different roles, will get Threat Remover and Volt Shot. And finally, Omniscient Eye, a solar rapid fire sniper rifle, can get 4 times the charm and precision instruments. Keep in mind, guys, these are just examples of some of the roles you can get on these weapons, but for my folks that still want craftable versions of these weapons, they're still going to be available, just not for the seasonal weapons. Now, the topic of loot, Bungie is also making a change to Nightfall focusing. The weekly weapon will now have its own featured category with updated costs. The base version will cost 1 Vanguard Ingram and 1 Nightfall Cipher, with the Adept versions costing 1 Vanguard Ingram and 50,000 Glimmer plus 10 Nightfall Ciphers. Now, in case you missed it, we're also finally getting a top slot Stasis Glaive. This will be our Nightfall reward called Rake Angle. It finally happened! We can rock triple glaives now! Now, Lost Sector rewards are also getting updated, as the new world pool weapons will be farmable in Lost Sectors as soon as they are added to the game. No longer do you have to wait until the next season to farm them. Granted, I don't know what the world drops are going to be, but we'll know soon enough. Change number 7. Fellas, exotic class items are finally getting attunement. You see, starting with Revenant, you're going to be able to attune to a specific perk for your exotic class items. Bungie's kind of stayed pretty quiet about this one outside of the first time they talked about it, but they did state that it's going to be launching with Revenant. We're hoping it's going to be launching at the start of Revenant. Now, this, of course, is an in-development screenshot, but essentially, you're going to be able to choose one perk for your exotic class item to attune to, which would then increase the chances of that perk dropping on your exotic class item. Now, it does say only one perk may be attuned at a time, so it's not like it's completely removing RNG, but it is mitigating it. This is going to be a great way to cut down on the grind though, guys. Maybe there's a particular role. Maybe you're like, yo, I want Liar's Handshake in Caliban, but for some reason the game never gives me Liar's. Now you can go in and select it. And with Xur also selling exotic class items, fellas, if you have not checked out how to get these exotics, feel free to check out our guide down below. Essentially doing the dual destiny mission just once, and then you can start farming for exotic class items elsewhere. And with Attunement, getting that god roll that you're looking for should be a lot easier. Now, change number 8. We have a massive amount of exotic armor changes, from buffs to nerfs. All of this information was revealed to us in the most recent TWAB, which was over 8,000 words. Now, I'm not going to cover every aspect, but I will go over some of the biggest armor changes that are coming. For hunters, Lucky Pants is receiving a nerf, but it's also receiving a buff. Bungie's actually going the route of like Stompies, where Lucky Pants is going to increase your slide distance and your sprint speed when a hand cannon is equipped. enemies, as well as a flat AE buff, even if its exotic perk is not currently active. On the flip side though, they're going to be nerfing its damage, or at least its maximum potential. Instead of a 600% increase in damage, it'll now be capped at 450%, which I know, it's a bummer. The only upside of this is that you don't have to match the elemental type of your hand cannon to your super. It also doesn't have to be a kinetic hand cannon. So again, there's like some levels of ease of use here, consistency in PvP that I wasn't expecting, that I think overall Bungie is hoping is going to counter the nerf from 600 to 450%. Next is Blight Ranger. Blight Ranger is receiving a rework and will now possess the former benefits that Raju's Harness used to give. Again, similar to what Bungie did in the past with Foe Tracer and Knucklehead Radar, where they consolidated the perks into one. Here, Blight Ranger is going to have the ability to cancel your Arc Staff super, and damaging or blinding enemies will grant a tier 4 arc weapon damage boost. Now you heard that right. Damaging or blinding enemies will grant you that arc weapon damage boost. You can imagine how many things this is going to synergize with. Now the downside to these changes is that Blight Ranger will no longer create orbs when reflecting with Arc Staff. Individually, it's going to be a buff, as it will directly refund super energy and extend the duration of the super itself. But in terms of like crazy orb creation for teammates, for Blight Ranger, that is a thing of the past. Now because of Raju's Harness and its perk being moved there to Blight Ranger, it's getting a complete rework. It's now going to have the ability to buff Gathering Storm. You see, when we activate Gathering Storm with Raju's Harness, it will now call down lightning on nearby enemies. It will jolt them and make allies amplified. And if you defeat arc debuff targets, this will grant a small amount of Gathering Storm super energy. Think of this as almost like Chaos Reach, Onyx Traces, and Geomax. Bungie's going this route here with Raju's Harness. Now moving over to my Titans, Icefall Mana is getting a huge buff, essentially becoming one of the best PvP exotics in the game. You're now going to get a stack of Frost Armor for Rapid Stasis Final Blows. And each time you get a stack of Frost Armor, you will also gain health. Now using the unique class ability now provides max stacks of Frost Armor instead of an Overshield. Now previously Icefall Mana would actually prevent you from sprinting or jumping. Now that is no longer the case. You will have full movement control, and you can even utilize this alongside the Thruster ability. So guys, you're going to have the same ability that you do now with Thruster, except here you could tack on the tankiness of Frost Armor. The other benefit is that your class ability energy will begin recharging immediately after using Icefall's class ability, meaning no lengthy cooldown. Now you're also going to get a burst of stasis energy when you cast your class ability, which will now freeze combatants and slow players. However, to offset all of these changes, Bungie is stating that it will no longer provide bonus stasis weapon damage. Now to me fellas, this seems like it's an exotic Bungie's trying to push us to use inside of PvP. And personally, after looking through all of these things, I'll take this over its previous version all day long. Now our next exotic that's getting touched includes Peacekeepers. It's getting the Lucky Pants treatment. Essentially, dealing damage to combatants with an SMG will increase your SMG damage. It's going to go up to a maximum of 20 stacks and will grant us a 100% increase in damage. Now each stack will only last for seconds, but each hit will add a stack and refresh that time. You can imagine so many different SMGs that will work beautifully with the reworked Peacekeepers. Next we have Mask of Quiet One. This is getting a pretty great change where rapid final blows and final blows while at critical health will now grant you Devour. Now you do have to have a Void super equipped in order to get Devour, but most of us already do that, especially on Prismatic. Now lastly, we've got some Warlock exotic changes. Osmiomancy is receiving a nerf, where the increased seeker distance and speed is reduced by 50%, and Bungie stated that this is meant to balance it in PvP, but this will of course affect PvE. Verity's Brow and Spirit of Verity are also getting a buff, where the first Death Throw stack will now provide a whopping 40% grenade damage in PvE, with each additional stack providing plus 15%, giving us a maximum of 100% at 5 stacks. On top of that, Skull of Dire Ahamkara is getting a change where weapon defeats while Devour is active will grant super energy, which will range between 1 to 4.5%. You can imagine how amazing this is going to be on things like Bad Juju, which already gives you super energy. There's a lot more changes outside of these guys, but these were the big bold points that caught our attention. Now moving on to change number 9. Ladies and gents, we have a handful of exotic weapons that are receiving some changes and reworks, and some of these are going to be weapons that do fully synergize with the artifact mods. But first up, Choir of One is finally getting that nerf. Bungie stated a while back that it had too much ammo in its reserves, so it's getting its base reserves reduced to 200, with its max reserves being moved down to 300. Also, the point-blank projectile impact damage is being reduced by 50%, which is quite substantial. Now for PvP, Bungie is buffing the hipfire projectile damage by 10% against players. It's also going to start with 7 ammo instead of 5. That's pretty substantial. I know a lot of people don't want to use Choir because of the ammo limitations, and I get it, but I do believe 7 is going to be a bit more manageable. Now, Huckleberry is getting a massive change, where the exotic itself intrinsically will auto-reload the weapon when getting kills. This was originally a feature designed for its exotic catalyst. Bungie instead is going to grant its exotic catalyst kinetic tremors. Fighting Lion will also spawn a volatile burst on direct hits. Bad Juju, which we just mentioned just earlier, is getting its string of curses buff duration increased from 5.5 seconds at base to now 7.5 seconds with the catalyst, and its magazine size increased from 27 to 36. Xdirus is getting a ton of different changes, including a direct hit damage buff by 33%, more consistency improvement, more trajectory improvement, its ammo count is getting bumped up in the reserves, and to top it all off, it will now spawn a moth on just 2 direct hits, meaning not only just kills will spawn a moth, but also direct hits themselves. Now, if you're concerned about the moth cooldown, no worries, Bungie is actually going to be reducing that from 4 seconds to 3 seconds. Now, these were some of the big exotic weapon changes that are coming. I'm sure more is going to be disclosed to us in the patch notes on Tuesday, but overall, guys, these weapons right here are looking to be quite spicy. Change number 10, Titans. We arguably have the biggest change coming our way. For the first time ever, Bungie is going to give us the ability to truly be the tank. You see, our Titan Barricade will now taunt enemies. Any enemy that is in front of us, when we cast our Barricade, both Rally and Tower will now grab aggro from those enemies. Now, I love this because identity-wise, everyone's kind of just playing the game of who does the most damage on the battlefield. Now, though, with a single pop of your Barricade, that is going to grab aggro, and combatants themselves will now shoot the Barricade. Now, if you're concerned about the Barricade getting shot out too quickly, no worries. Bungie's actually going to boost our Tower Barricade and our Rally Barricade. Essentially, non-boss combatant damage dealt to the Barricade itself will be reduced by 50%. They've also increased the splash damage reduction from combatants for players behind the Barricade from 20 to 60%. And Barricades themselves will now grant moderate damage resistance during cast animation. Fellas, this is a core fundamental change for Titans, and I love that Bungie is heading in this direction because this is kind of like one of those MMO aspects that's been kind of missing from Destiny, but we do have class identity. Warlocks are healers, Titans are tanks, and Hunters roll on the ground. These are our class identities, and I love to see Bungie leaning more into that. Now, there's some other changes, including things like Consecration is going to finally shatter stasis crystals. This was a change that was supposed to happen months ago. Diamond Lance will now shatter stasis crystals as well. And if you slam a Diamond Lance, that being its heavy attack, you and nearby allies will gain Frost Armor. Now, the last notable change that Titans are receiving is to our base empowered melees. You see, the damage is being increased against players by 5%. And inside of PvE against combatants, it's being increased by 20%. Essentially, here, guys, our fists should hit harder than the other classes' melees, as it should be. Change number 11. We have a number of ability changes, guys, coming our way that even if you aren't a Titan, you're going to be eating pretty good. First up, Storm Trance's damage resist is finally getting increased from 53% to 58%. Chaos Reach is getting its damage resist increased from 51 to now 58%. The main takeaway from these two is that you won't be shredded in your super inside of PvP, because let's be real, right now, especially Chaos Reach, I literally just peek out and team shot those Warlocks to death. Now, Nova War is getting its PvE damage increased by 20%, with its damage resist going up from 51 to now 58%. Its detonation will also apply volatile. Now, this is regardless of the charge duration. It doesn't have to be the perfect charge. Now, both Marksman and Deadshot Golden Gun are getting a 30% increase in damage against base, elite, and mini boss combatants. Spectral Blades is getting a 20% PvE damage increase, and their damage resistance is going up from 47 to 58%. Bungie desperately wants us to use Spectral Blades in PvE, but to be honest with you, I don't even think this change is going to make me use it. I'm just saying. Now, Twilight Arsenal's axe projectiles are getting more consistent tracking towards targets, and its relic weapon damage is being increased by 23%. However, when combined with Spirit of the Star Eater on our exotic class item, Twilight Arsenal is seeing a massive nerf by minus 26%. So keep that in mind. Now, Thundercrash's base detonation damage is being increased by 33%. Fist of Havoc is seeing its damage resistance going up from 51 to 58%. And they've also changed how the light attack will work to improve consistency and to slightly increase the light attack's lunge range. They also improve the ability to target enemies that are vertical, meaning you won't have the situation where you charge and you just literally just charge underneath an enemy over and over. Now, though, you should be able to actually suck up to them and get the kill. There's a ton of ability ability changes that Bungie's disclosed to us over the past few weeks, and we'll be going into those in more detail when the patch notes drop. But this takes us to change number 12, Sandbox Changes. Fellas, you can't have a new episode/season without a meta shakeup. First, let's start with our heavy burst pulse rifles. Their rounds per minute is being increased from 300 to 324. Now, to offset that RPM increase, they are going to be reducing the damage by 18% in PvE, and that will include things like Revenant Lance and Revision Zero's heavy burst mod. However, both of those exotics are only going to be getting an 8% nerf versus the 18%. Keep in mind, this archetype is already very strong, and with the RPM increase, I think it's still going to be just as good. Now, snipers are getting a lot of changes. Bungie's going to be reducing the flinch that they receive against Cabans by 50%. They're also going to reduce the camera roll against players by 10%. Now, Bungie really wants us to start using sniper rifles, which is why they've increased their damage dramatically inside of PvE. We're going to get a 60% increase in damage against minors, a 75% increase in damage against majors, a 35% increase in damage against mini bosses, and 25% damage against champions. These are massive buffs, guys. Sniper rifles are going to become a must-have for our loadouts. The shotguns are also getting increased range in PvE, which is a pretty interesting change because Bungie stated that this is only a range change for PvE, not PvP. Now, rocket sidearms are receiving their first major nerf, with more to come in the future. Essentially, though, Bungie's going to start by reducing the reserve ammo by 25%. Essentially, they've seen us using them like primary weapons, and they want us to stop. Personally, I hope this is the only nerf they do to rocket sidearms. Next, we have grenade launchers. Grenade launchers are receiving changes to their detonation damage and their projectile impact damage, which means inside of PvE, the total damage will be about the same as it is now, but will be split differently. Lastly, rapid-fire heavy grenade launchers are getting both its impact and detonation damage increased by 7%. Now, we also have a number of PvP-specific weapon tunings. Adaptive hand cannons are getting a nerf, just slightly, essentially reducing the 3-tap range. Adaptive auto rifles is being toned down just slightly to reduce forgiveness against high resilience targets. High impact pulse rifles is getting its crit damage reduced, pushing us in a zone to land 6 crits instead of 5 crits one body in order to secure that optimal time to kill. The rest, though, are just a ton of different buffs. Things like adaptive SMGs are getting a buff, precision auto rifles are getting a buff, high impact auto rifles are getting a buff, precision hand cannons are also getting a buff. Heavy burst pulse rifles are having their crit damage increase alongside the RPM changes, meaning their time to kill change is going from 0.87 to 0.8. Aggressive scout rifles are also getting a crit damage increase, which will affect things like Dead Man's Tale. So overall, guys, we have some meaningful changes coming that should influence the meta. Now, there's a ton of stuff we haven't covered sandbox-wise, but we'll be covering that in more depth on Tuesday, as most of these changes should make it through, but sometimes things make it through, and then sometimes things are added last minute. And as soon as we have the patch notes in front of us, we'll be going over those. Change number 13, PvP. Guys, one of our favorite maps is making a return, Solitude. This is a Mars map that was one of my favorite maps back in the day. This updated version of it, though, is going to have some small changes to geometry and spawn locations to improve map flow. But Bungie has set it up so that it can immediately be dropped into both competitive and our 6v6 game modes. However, it is being held off from entering trials just for a bit. Now, on top of this, Bungie has updated some of the UI within PvP. Now it will display class icons instead of Guardian ranks, meaning you could see right there whether that was a Warlock, Hunter, or Titan. Now, on top of that, Bungie is giving us an update to our death screen. When you die, it will now show who killed you, but who also assisted in killing you. On top of that, when you or an ally dies, there will be an icon right under your skull that shows the type of weapon that landed the final blow. I'm hoping this is not going to junk up the UI too much, guys, with icons everywhere, but I will say seeing the weapon that was used to get the kill directly on the screen versus in the kill feed is some pretty critical feedback that can help you if you're looking to engage right after. Next up, the mercy rule is being updated as Bungie has extended the window within which a game can mercy. And they also close the gap between when you can join a game in progress and when a mercy is being enabled, meaning there shouldn't be moments where you join a game and literally right afterward, that team that you just joined on is being mercied. Next up, for competitive, Bungie has reduced the variability of points granted based on the skill delta between the two teams. They also changed the way placement matches work. to make it more accurately track towards your expected rank. Now, Trials is also getting some changes. First up, for the map rotation, the plan right now is going to be to feature Dissonance, Cirrus Plaza, Eventide Labs, Javelin 4, Burnout, Endless Veil, Altar Flame, Wormhaven, Rusted Lands, and Midtown, with a handful of flex weeks throughout. And this is pretty good news, as these are pretty much the best maps to play Trials on. But during the season, we're also going to be getting Trials Labs. Bungie is looking to test out class-based Trials. Now, there's also been some reward changes, including the post-game standard weapon has been updated to have a 50% drop chance of it being the featured weekly weapon, which means you still have a chance of getting other weapons if the weekly featured one isn't the one that you're interested in. But then lastly, Bungie also is looking at increasing the cap of our Osirian ciphers, allowing them to have a chance to drop as a post-win reward on 7-win cards. They're also going to be looking to reduce fire team matchmaking to allow duos to match trios more often. However, the upside for this is that if you're the solo player that's on the team with the duo, you actually get loss forgiveness, which is fantastic for solo players. Now, change number 14. Guys, for the first time in years, we are getting brand new weapon mods. Now, I'm not going to go over every single one, but you can see them here on the screen. But they're pretty interesting. Essentially, these are combo stat mods. They're going to be bundling 2 stats together, giving us +6 to each of the stats. For example, we have Ballistics here, which increases range and stability. We have Tactical, which increases reload and handling. We've got Anti-Flinch, which gives us 50% flinch reduction. We're also going to get an ammo finder enhancement mod for special or heavy weapons, which will progress getting that type of ammo roughly 10% faster per kill with your weapons. Optic mods are also being included, which can do some crazy things like raising our zoom by +2 or even lowering our zoom by -2. There's a CQC optic, which can increase zoom by +1 or -1. Synergy is also going to be a mod, which will give an escalating chance to spawn a subclass bauble, that being things like Ionic Traces, Fire Sprites, Void Breaches, anything that's matching our weapon damage type, it can do. And for kinetic weapons, it could spawn an Orb of Power, which makes me wonder if we could double up on Orbs of Power with the Kinetic Siphon and the Synergy mod. Then last but not least, we have Stun Loader, which will partially refill your magazine when you stun a champion. These are actually some very unique mods that I didn't expect Bungie to give us, but things have been stale in this department for quite some time, especially here recently. Once spec mods have been removed, everybody's just using things like backup mag. But I'm hoping these mods are going to push us to experiment more. Now, change number 15. Guys, this is going to be our miscellaneous tab. I couldn't just pick one to end things off on. We're just going to go through and just start lining everything up. First up, fellas, if you didn't get a skimmer last time Guardian Games was around, fret not. Bungie's giving us a new one called the Zerf board. It's going to be available at Zerf starting the 2nd weekend of Revenant, and it's only going to cost 97 strange coins. Now, originally, I thought this was just going to be an alternative to my skimmer that I currently have, but hot damn it, it looks sexy. So this may become the main one. We're also going to be getting a brand new Iron Banner armor set coming, which also looks amazing. On top of that, Iron Banner is bringing a Stasis Rocket sidearm. For the first time in a long time, Iron Banner is kind of looking like a desirable event. I know! I can't believe I'm saying that. Now last, but certainly not least, the Inverted Spire Strike, the OG, is returning. Now, Bungie is returning it to us completely updated, and they mentioned in the dev live stream that every encounter has been updated, and this time around, the Vex will be the main enemy presence. If it goes the round of Lake of Shadows, guys, it should be quite challenging. So guys, those are our 15 biggest changes coming with the launch of Episode 2 Revenant. Let me know in the comments below which one of these you're most excited for, and if you want to join us over on Twitch, we will be live streaming everything from patch notes to the launch of this episode to the new weapons and exotics. We'll be live over on our Twitch channel, and we would love to have you along for the ride. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.